Well, joining us now is Tom Burke, Chairman and Co-founder of E3G. Tom Burke, welcome to you. On that point about the energy mix, we've got ageing nuclear power stations being decommissioned, coal-fired power stations doing the same. If we are to keep the lights on, given that the sun doesn't always shine, the wind doesn't always blow, at least not hard, we have to have some base provision from nuclear power.
Well, we don't, which is fortunate, as nuclear power stations are unplanned offline about 25% of the time. They're also intermittent, as indeed is all generation. So it's fortunate that we don't actually need baseload power. It's about 5 years or so since the then chief executive of Steve Halliday said, baseload is an outmoded concept in terms of how you manage an electricity grid, and that's because we have modern sensors, we have deep data, deep analytics, much more sophisticated software. We're able to manage our electricity system in a way that delivers affordable and reliable electricity much more efficiently than we were able to in the past, and we simply don't need these very big baseload power stations of any kind anymore, but certainly not ones of the size of the new Hinkley Station at 3.2 gigawatts.
I was just mentioning to our previous guest the experience of Germany when they decided to cancel their nuclear programs. And they found, perhaps only in the short or medium term, that having denied themselves nuclear power, they were falling back on using more polluting power sources.
Yeah, and there's a good point there in the sense that Germany decided to close its existing nuclear power stations, which meant it had to replace them much more quickly. I've got nothing against running our existing nuclear power stations on as long as it's safe. I just don't think we ever need to build any more to replace the ones that are going to become out of date and close in the next 10 years or so.
There isn't a complete consensus on this in the environmental sector, is there? People like George Mumby, for instance, a well-known figure in environmental circles, memorably came out and said part of the energy mix has to be nuclear.
Yeah, he did. And George is a journalist. He's not an environmentalist, and it showed the limits of what he knows about energy policy. He's simply wrong about that.
Okay, just remind us why he's wrong.
He's wrong because we now have the cost of renewables has gone down, the cost of storage has gone down absolutely dramatically, far faster than anybody thought possible, and we're now in a position to deliver all of the electricity people needs over the next coming decades without reliance on nuclear power stations any more than we are reliant on big coal-fired power stations. And towards the end of the coming decade, we'll be able to do it without reliance on gas either. So we're moving into a very different kind of electricity system, and the idea that nuclear power, which is essentially a 20th century technology, is what you need to solve a 21st century problem is simply wrong.
Tom, what if you're wrong? What if we get the energy mix absolutely wrong and the lights start to go out?
Well, I think if the lights start to go out, we're in very serious trouble. We're going to move to a much more electricity dependent system, and so you absolutely need to be sure before you say the things that I am saying that you're confident can be done. The man who's currently running the electricity grid, Fintan Sly, says that we can be carbon neutral in this country in the 2020s, early 2020s. That's what he's saying now, and that depends on the small amount of nuclear we've got available at the moment. By the time we get to the end of that decade, that nuclear will be gone, but we will have replaced it by renewables that are even more cheap, by a lot more energy efficiency. And one of the things that's made the biggest difference to decarbonisation is not so much policy measures as simply on energy generation. It's simply improvements in the efficiency with which we use energy. Gas consumption has gone down for a decade in this country because we're heating our buildings much more smartly, and in doing that, of course, we're keeping people's bills down.
Yeah, I interviewed him yesterday, Fintan Sly, about this very point and about managing demand. Is it as simple as it seemed, this idea of encouraging people to use electricity, for instance, at certain times of the day, perhaps storing electricity in domestic batteries effectively in their own homes. Is that something that will enjoy widespread take-up?
I think that's something that will enjoy widespread take-up, not the least because if you do it properly, you'll be giving at least some people the opportunity to get a cheque through the door as well as a bill. But I don't want to suggest this is terribly simple and it's just, you can just sort of move forward without encountering any problems. It's just that those problems are much more solvable than the problems of trying to build very big nuclear power stations, as the French have discovered. The one they've just announced further delays that they're building exactly like the one we're building at Hinkley at the moment, and it's nearly 4 times over budget and 15 years late. And that
but the French do have carbon emissions that are half of ours.
I'm not saying it. You don't get much less carbon from nuclear power. I'm simply saying you were asking a question about the reliability. Can you be confident the lights won't go out? Well, the French have discovered you can be a lot less confident in nuclear than you might have thought.
Tom Burke, appreciate your time. Thanks a lot.
Pleasure.